What we're going to do now is a typical way of cooking meat from the area in Italy where I come from, and it's incredibly simple. What do? You boil it. Now, was always thought these two things. If you boil meat to make stock, you put the meat with the cold water, and that way, during the process of getting to boiling, somehow the stock becomes better. The meat, on the other hand, is not so great. I think it's something about the way it cooks that changes the fibre or whatever. If you're actually doing boiled meat, what you want to do is to first boil the water. Now, it's never just water on its own, because that would be a bit too bland. So we normally do a kind of stock. What I do, I can put some onions, I can put some celery, I might put some carrot. Depending on the meat, I could put some potatoes in it, because it enriches the stock where the meat is going to cook. It's rich in minerals and so forth, and never peeled. And then I might use a bit of vegetable stock or pot bouillon. In this case, I'm using a vegan pot bouillon that is quite is dairy-free, and it's quite nice and light. Just be careful. Pot bouillon sometimes, or stock, they tend to have salt in it, so that might influence the saltiness of the stock. The quantity changes, of course. And then I'm going to wait for this to go to boiling point. And once it gets boiling point, I'm going to add some salt, and then I'm going to put the meat in. Now, the cut of meat I'm using now is ox cheeks. Ox cheeks is probably one of the best cuts of meat. It's incredibly tender once it's cooked, very tasty, and on the plus is actually very cheap as well. So I'm a great fan. Now, the problem with ox cheeks is that A, it takes a long time to cook. B, if you try to cut it from raw, it's really, really tough. It's really hard. You know, I'm just thinking of the cow has been chewing, and it's really, because you know cows spend most of the life chewing. They just there's ruminant, I don't know the word in English. So they actually, these are incredibly well exercised muscles. But once it's cooked, you don't need a knife. Once it's cooked, you actually can cut it with a fork. And so the way I cook it, I don't roast it. I think it probably needs a bit of liquid to cook properly. But I either boil it or I stew it. And I might do one of the stews later on. What I learned is, when I stew it, to begin with, I was kind of like, you know, I was trying to dice it, and it took me forever. It took me forever to actually dice the meat, because it's so tough. So now I just stew the whole piece, and then I just cut it at the very last moment. So here we go. I'm going to show you. This is a beautiful piece of meat. If you're a vegetarian, look away. But this tends to be like this. It often has pieces of fat. So if it is too much fat, I'm going to take it away. Otherwise, all you need to do is to put this in the water once it boils. So I'm just going to trim away this piece of fat, which seems a bit. It won't make much difference if you don't, because if it's fat, it's going to melt during cooking period. But then it's going to make the stock quite dense, and we might not want that. So here we go, and that's it. gets the preparation of the meat done. As you can see, it's incredibly quick. And now all we need to do is wait for the water to boil. So now the water is boiling. I just want to add a bit of salt because that's going to enrich the stock where the meat is going to cook. But I'm going to taste it first. Yeah, because if the pot bouillon had too much saltiness in it, it would be too much. I normally use Maldon salt for meats, but in this case I'm going to have to use some rock salt because it's for the stock really, rather than the meat itself. And Maldon has a beautiful ability to bring out the juices from meat or fish, but I find it doesn't have a high content of salinity as such. So it would be a bit wasted and lost in water, while this one is a bit stronger. And there we go. Just put the meat inside, like that. Cover it. I'm going to lower the heat a bit so that it keeps boiling, but it's not too excited. Also because that would consume the water, the stock too much. And this is going to be having to cook for a couple of hours. So you just leave it there and forget about it. I think that's one of the kind of dishes that in my farming past, in terms of family, people used to have agas, and so it's the kind of things that you would put a big pot on it, or even on the fireplace, forget about it, and just let it go. I think the French have a similar thing, which is called the pot-au-feu, and again, it's just meat boiled into a very rich stock, and to the point that I think that sometimes you just recycle the stock, not forever, but so that it already has a bit of meatiness in it. And I remember in Paris, I went to this restaurant. By chance, I found this restaurant, which serves basically, it's called the Roi du Pot-au-Feu, and serves nothing but boiled meat. It's just they have these amazing pots, I think that which is probably like that. And the menu is the meat with the vegetables that it cooks with, and other things like croûtons with bone marrow, or a soup made with the stock, or anything. It's just all focused. And I think that certainly my grandparents would do something similar. The boiled meat is a typical dish of the area I come from, Piedmont. One of the traditional dishes in Piedmont is bollito misto, which is a mixed boiled meat selection. And it's quite regulated. You have to have there are 7 cuts of meat, which include tongue, the head, and by head we actually mean the cheek as well, because usually you have the head with the meat attached, and the head is kind of like sort of like the texture, or it's gelatinous almost. And then you have cotechino, which is a kind of salami, which it's done, it's seasoned, and then it's aged, and then it's cooked, and you will have chicken, and then some specific cuts, including brisket, brisket, and also shin, which kind of like react particularly well to being boiled. And this is served usually with vegetables and specific sauces, and it's actually incredibly delicious. It really is wonderful. And because you cannot do boiled meat for 2 people. It tends to be a kind of celebratory meal, and in the autumn you still find specific restaurants in Piedmont will actually offer it in autumn and winter. Of course, it's not something you would do in the summer. Sometimes in my family we do it for Christmas. It's just the main dish for a Christmas meal, because roast turkey is not what we traditionally do. And so you would get, you only do this when you have, I don't know, at least 12 people, and it's a huge, wonderful celebration, and you just share this meal and with a very good wine from the area. It's going to be a red wine, it's probably going to be a Nebbiolo base wine, if you can afford it, Barolo. But actually there are some amazing wines from the area which is going to be absolutely perfect for that. Dolcetto or Grignolino tend to be really, really nice with this kind of dishes. Anyway, all we can do now is wait until it's ready. See you later. So here we go. This has been cooking for 2 hours now, and it's beautifully tender and moist, I think is the word I'm looking for. With this I'm going to just serve a very simple lettuce. This is gem lettuce. It's nice to have it with cooked vegetables if you want. We usually serve it with boiled potatoes and other boiled vegetables, mashed potatoes, very good. But I like the contrast with the freshness of the salad. So I'm just going to chop some of this lettuce very roughly. And this I'm going to dress just with a bit of salt and olive oil. You can of course use vinegar with it, but I'm not having vinegar at the moment, so I won't have it. Just a tiny amount of... Oh, also actually you can also have it with lemon. And let's have this nicer olive oil. Just a drip of olive oil. Now is our meat. Always. That's all it is. I'm going to slice it. Find the best direction to slice it with. And it always has a kind of gelatinous vein in the middle, a bit like feather. It's actually delicious. There we go, and that's... Again, you can serve this with sauces. Of course, it's beautiful with mustard or even ketchup. If the meat is undersalted, which is not in this case, you can add just a bit of salt on the meat. And here we go. Very delicious boiled ox cheek with salad.